Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being you and putting this together with others. It's been a good afternoon. I didn't know what to read. I never do, or very rarely, so I thought I'd just grab the last three things I'd written. And so it's a good method. So yeah, this is called Underdog on the Tucker Box. There's a hobo living in the big potato. They can't evict him, though it's made of asbestos. He doesn't care about OH&S. Someone sprayed a Dick and Paul's on the big prawn. True. The big banana got smaller. The big koala is angry at the crowds drawn by the big lump of coal and the big jet ski. The big merino is scabby with disease, and the big Clive Palmer with the cafe in its head is looking shabby, its eyes chewed out by cockies. Is that clear? Thank you. Yeah, it's just two short ones, and this is called Malantine. I whittled a forest to make your wooden leg, filled the sea with plastic to give you clothes pegs. To build you a kitchen, I smoked the sky. To mould you a mud pack, I made the meadows styes. To keep your bath abrim, I dammed the streams and levelled the hills for the view of your dreams. I shrank the poles to ice cubes to cool your drink. Perfected scent on animals to hide your human stink. I melted fleeting species to make your eyelash glue. I'd love to find you flowers, but I've dumped the world for you. Thank you.
Arise, arise, ye workers from your slumbers. That was the beginning of the International bass part, which Christine Pinocchio will know. It is May Day, May Day, May Day. That's our topic, so I thought I'd get us in the mood. I know May Day was in Parramatta today, but I'm glad you're here, and thanks everyone for coming to join us here on Gadigal land. It's great to have everyone here, and thank you to Mark and the Addison Road Community Centre for putting it on. I'm very pleased to welcome our four speakers this afternoon. We have Vivienne Moore, who will speak to us in a moment. She's the founder of the Welfare Alliance. Molina, I'm going to get it right, Janet Burstall, founder of Living Incomes for Everyone, Life, which is rather nice. Molina Asthana, lawyer and lead Victorian convener of Asian Australian Alliance. And last but not least, Rosanna Barbero, who's the CEO of the Addison Road Community Centre. And to kick us off, Vivienne Moore, who's just going to have a little bit of a rave to us. Vivienne.
Hi everyone. Once again, I'm Vivienne Moore, founder of the Welfare Alliance. So approximately 3 years ago, due to a long-term chronic illness, and after retiring from my career as a scientist, I decided I needed to apply for the disability support pension. It took me 2 years and 2 applications to finally be successful. During that 2 years, I lived in a constant state of fear and distress, fear of homelessness, and at times, I couldn't afford the basics like medication, food, bus fare. I was fortunate. I had support of family, friends, and an organisation called Stepping Out, and an amazing support worker, her name, Melissa Holmes. Once through the process, I was able to relax and recuperate, and realised I wanted to help others by just simply giving quick, easy information about how to negotiate Centrelink. How to do this, I thought. Face-to-face, immediate help. So where? Addison Road. So 7 months ago, I approached Rosanna, pitched my idea to her outside the food pantry. Her response was immediate. Do it. Set it up. Set a table up here, outside the food pantry, and see how it goes. For the last 7 months, I have first and foremost listened to hundreds of stories, my story, over and over again. The fear, the isolation, the shame. I'm able to offer simple, but what I believe is essential information when dealing with Centrelink. I do think what I can provide on a deeper emotional level is 1, you're not alone, and 2, you will get through this. So 7 months on, personally, I'm pissed off. There's a huge disconnect between government policy and life on welfare. I want to challenge people's beliefs. Let's say Middle Australia. We've all been drip-fed bullshit for decades. Dole bludgers, welfare cheats. Using my story and the stories I've been told, I'd like to reach hearts and minds, have people think about their values and challenge them with the truth. So, finally, in 1948, the United Nations recognised in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that we all have the right to adequate standards of living, the basics being shelter and food and freedom from fear. So thank you for listening. Thank you to Mark for organising this. And thank you to Addi Road and all the volunteers here today. Thanks.
Thank you. It's great to be in face-to-face events again after having spent a year dealing with people online mainly, and it's part of what the storytelling point is about, just as Vivienne said. I want to talk about storytelling in the context of the Living Incomes for Everyone campaign, which has a big banner hanging up over there, and our demands are also on a table if you want to pick up a flyer of them. I helped to found the campaign about a year ago in peak lockdown when the coronavirus package actually made life a little bit easier for people who had been so badly punished. And also to look at why it's so hard to get these stories of hardship, especially for unwaged and low-paid people, recognised by authority. People are living Mayday in a state of emergency. Life brings together groups of people whose stories are all personal, individual and urgently demanding of solutions to immediate threats of homelessness, insolvency, hunger, exclusion. And their needs and stories are denied by government except for that brief period of relief. So there are many stories and genres of storytelling about poverty and hardship, and wanting governments and service providers and landlords and employers to stop punishing, harassing and penalising people in need. So you're probably all familiar, it's been great to hear people telling stories about the power of storytelling. Life tries to do something a bit different with the stories. ACOS and charities like the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre, Smith Family, Mission Australia, they all incorporate individual stories of hardship. You see faces, children who don't fit in at school and so on. They use all those stories in their submissions and fundraising. And there's a genre of writing by well-known authors who set out to deliberately experience poverty in order to convey the meaning of it, such as Dirt Cheap by Elizabeth Weinhausen and Nickel and Diamond by Barbara Ehrenreich. The stories are being told that even the Academy Award-winning film Nomadland this year is a dramatisation of hardship in the USA, the kind of insecurity and poverty faced by people. But life is trying to do something different with the stories to cut through. We're working to build out of the stories of the various groups of people who suffer hardship in different ways, who are used to collecting their own stories together, but to meld and fuse them together into common issues to develop a collective agency and power. So we're melding them to find the demands that can unite us all. And the point of having demands, which we've drafted together, discussed quite extensively to agree on this set of demands, which are summarised as 5 points, but actually have a lot more than that to them. They express a will and an intention. So rather than addressing what we called in a week of action in March, the poverty machine, as though we can melt the heart of something heartless, we place demands on them to stop treating people with this disrespect and disregard. And so the stories are important for us to tell each other and ourselves, but the point is to address demands for what we want, to the power that is so heartless. And so on this May Day, International Workers' Day, I want to offer a brief and necessarily oversimplified take on Marxist political economy to answer this question: why are governments so heartless? Why is it so hard to get these stories recognised? I want to point further than just one horrible Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, or even his predecessors. I want to go deeper than saying that it's neoliberal ideology or trickle-down economics, as though there's some slightly better way of managing the social relations in which we live. I want to ask the question, in whose interests are these stories ignored and are these needs denied? It's actually an advantage to employers if people are in desperate straits and short of work. That pulls down the lowest rates of pay and makes people more submissive at work for fear of losing their jobs. Competition between households for homes to rent or buy increases the wealth of landlords and banks, and it means that people cannot afford housing. Return on investment is the driver of all these things, and it's an insidious force which spreads through the entire society. It means in our society it's counterposed to meeting people's needs as an alternative principle, and they're not reconcilable principles. The government only minimally fills the gaps in needs in order to avoid us becoming collectively unruly, as today's Writers' Festival wants to encourage us to become, and to manage economic instability and to make sure there is a labour force available. If they didn't feed, clothe and school us, then they wouldn't have anybody to employ or lend money to. So I think the problem is this level of interest, that level of interest in return on investment is overpowering. So we have to fight it back with our own collective will, and that's where the potential of these stories of hardship come in, is that they're a foundation from which we can educate each other and become determined to do something about it. And we seek to translate them from stories of individual difficulties into something collective that can unite, find the common thread across people who may be unwaged, very low-waged, insecurely employed, overcommitted, and that is actually a class issue, that we seek to find the common factors that, regardless of our other identities, or that might make us experience this economic power differently, Indigenous people particularly because of dispossession of land, people experience refracted through their identity, but we seek to unite people around a common opposition for meeting everybody's needs through involving a wide range of groups and identifying and discussing this and continuing to evolve our demands. So we hope that you might make contact with the Living Incomes for Everyone campaign. And for a closing thought on the power of storytelling, I just have been recently reminded about the radical women's liberation movement of the 1970s, both by the Me Too movements and the Standing Up March for Justice, and also the documentary Brazen Hussies streaming on ABC TV. Consciousness raising is a form of storytelling, and before the distancing effects of social media, it was storytelling together, listening, sharing, and as Vivienne talked about, common experiences and knowing that you're not alone, through which women concluded what they previously thought was personal, individual pain and frustration is actually social and collective, and open to challenge via social and collective action. So I'm making a plea for, on May Day, let's think about organising.
invite Molina to join us and talk about what the Asian Australian Alliance is and why it's important. Thank you, Molina.
Thank you. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any other elders that may be present in the room today. So the Asian Australian Alliance is an advocacy network which empowers, advocates and creates a platform for change for all Asian Australians by creating projects, workshops, campaigns and public awareness. We have in the past had campaigns in relation to the watering down of Section 18C, the marriage equality campaign, and many others. And our recent project has been the COVID-19 racism incident reporting survey that we started last year. Our COVID-19 survey was launched in April 2020 and was done in collaboration with Osman Chu, a research fellow at the Per Capita think tank. Our inspiration came from the American group, the Stop AP Hate, which was a survey and started with their survey, as well as seeing the courage of many Asian Australians that was showing by coming out in the social media with their stories and experiences. Our survey is also the first of its kind in Australia history to track anti-Asian hate data. There have been quite a few after that since we launched our survey. So to date, we have recorded almost 515 incidents of COVID-19 related racism. And this is a huge number for Australia, considering our entire population is just on the verge of 24 million. We also, and with Asian ancestry accounting for almost 12 to 15% of the entire population. In a way, we are collecting stories of people whose voices go unheard and therefore ignored and unrepresented. It's presenting the evidence to prevent these stories or experiences from going untold or being taken into account in policy and decision making. I'm not sure if you're aware, but 90% cases of racism are not reported. Or most of them are racial slurs. Approximately 22% stated of the ones who responded to this survey stated that the perpetrator made the racial slur out as a joke. This was just done mostly by acquaintances of the respondent. The other top selection were verbal threats at 16%, getting spat at and or sneezed on 13%, and physical intimidation at 12%. These are important stories that we need to make known to everyone around in Australia and around the world. A lot of the time, the narrative is shaped by media, who are the storytellers, and have responsibility to talk about structural inequalities and give voice to those who are marginalized. But more often than not, they are either deliberately ignored, these stories, or they are distorted in a manner that exacerbates the problem. I was once told by a journalist that you have the responsibility for bringing out stories from your own community. I don't think that's true. You go and search for the stories for other communities, for the mainstream. Why can't you come and look for our stories that are really important? So this is, we are hoping to bring about a change in the way media reports or reports the media narrative as well. That's an important part of our work. We have collaborated recently with Addi Road Community Centre, and Rosanna is an amazing person who's doing great work, and the whole team is, and we really want to support the work that they're doing with Racism Not Welcome. I'm hoping that we can raise that awareness and have street signs everywhere all across Australia. We also have a global report that we are working on, that we're collaborating with the US, with Canada, UK and New Zealand to bring about these stories of racism across the world and find what the common threads are in those stories and how we can address them. We have run various workshops with the communities, creating awareness. There really is, people are not aware of these stories. People are not being able to respond in the way they can. We want to create that awareness, and we want people like yourself to become active bystanders and who can actually take action as much as we can as well. So I hope that our work, I hope that we can create that awareness for our work, and I hope that you can support the work that we're doing as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are wearing the T-shirt, but I think it's probably time that we talk to Rosanna Barbero about that campaign. In my other life, I'm a local government councillor at Molina West Council, and it was a really fantastic thing that, well, all but one of us actually supported the Racism Not Welcome campaign. I guess you can if you're in a Westies, you can ponder on which Liberal council it was that voted against it. But I'll now hand over to Rosanna to talk to us about the Racism Not Welcome campaign. Thank you, Rosanna.
Her name is Julia Passes, so she must be named and shamed. Thank you, Colin, and thank you for my fellow comrades, sisters and social warriors. How many people in the audience has seen a Racism Not Welcome sign? So almost everyone. All over, wonderful. The very first one was here at Addison Road Centre. So I just want to talk a little bit about the campaign and then hand it back to Colin to facilitate a Q&A so we can hear from everybody. But Addison Road Community Organisation is the convener of the Inner West Multicultural Network, and there are 120 civil society organisation members. And just before COVID hit, very early on, a lot of our members were talking about heightened incidences of racism. Many of our members were reporting racist attacks, either towards themselves or the people that they worked with or the people in their community. At the same time, we were made aware of the Asian Australian Alliance, who were at that time just started their research and very quickly collected 377 cases, which now there's over 500, within a very short span of 2 months. And, there was a whole range of horrific cases. And also people on councils who were of Asian background were also receiving horrific death threats and racist attacks and hate mail. And so this was happening quite quickly. And of course we know that our Indigenous community have been suffering for hundreds of years, and other communities as well. And so we started a broad community consultation to try and understand what was going on. And at the same time, during COVID, we had thousands of people streaming here because they had been abandoned by the government, particularly people on temporary visas, a lot of which were international students. And so every day we were in contact with people despite lockdowns or restrictions, but we were hearing stories all the time. When we started to do community consultations, we spoke to over 650 people, and it was really clear from our end, we were very action orientated. What are we going to do with all these stories? We need to take action. There needs to be a consciousness building, but also an army to do something. Something has to change. But what became incredibly evident was that people really needed to share their stories, and that's what happened time and time again. And so eventually after months of this process, we came up in a collaborative process with the idea of creating a campaign that wasn't branded, that didn't belong to Addi Road or didn't belong to anybody, but belonged to the people and to all of us. So racism, #racism not welcome, is a campaign for every council in Australia, and there are 537 councils, and we want to see 537 councils that make up this country called Australia to take a stance and plaster their geographical precincts, their areas, to say racism is not welcome. So every child, man, woman speaks to this, for everybody to take this responsibility and make it theirs. And really, the idea of communities, LGAs, one at a time, people coming together, the signs go up, the discussions, the stories, the actions that happen around that, and it creates broader discussions about inequality and who's got the power and whose voices are being heard, and why are the voices of the majority being ignored. So that's what we're hoping to happen. We've got 14 councils so far that have adopted the campaign. There have been the upper house of the New South Wales Parliament have adopted the campaign, the Teachers Federation, 6 schools have put it up. There's been some conflict in the community, there's been a backlash, but that's okay because racism is something that's horrific, and it needs to be tackled, it needs to be talked about, and the stories need to be changed, and enough is enough. From one LGA at a time, we're going to change a country called Australia.
Hear, hear. Rosanna. Well, I mean, I know that Randwick have City of Sydney.
You said 14.
14, yeah. Wallara.
Bayside.
Bayside, which is Rockdale mascot. Strathfield. Inner West, of course, yeah. Liverpool. I should say, unfortunately, one has already declined, and that is one of the most multicultural councils in our city, Cumberland, which is created from the former Auburn and chunks of the former Parramatta Council. Unfortunately, the majority there is a Conservative majority, including people who have ratted from the Labor Party and joined the Conservatives. So it's a very disappointing thing, but if you live in Cumberland or got friends there, do let them know. I know we're bound by time as well as anything else, but I might just pose, Mark's just given me 5 minutes, so I might just throw a question if I can, because it is May Day, and unions are the basis of that story in lots of ways. One of the great slogans, if you like, of the 19th century from the union movement was 8-8-8. That is 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, and 8 hours play. Something that a lot of workers these days don't actually enjoy. I guess my question to the panellists is, have the organised union movement left behind the people you're talking about? And briefly, what do you think, how is that message of equality and fairness that the union movement has been associated with, how has that been stifled in the story we're hearing at the moment? Be my guest.
Looks like I've been left holding the microphone. It's a very, very big question, Colin. So I don't think I can really do it justice without at least 2 hours. I would say there's a general conservatising of the whole country, and I think there's people have been caught short, and union leaders have been caught short as well by the kinds of changes that have been wrought since the 1980s. They haven't kept up with the globalisation of the capitalist economy. They continue to assume that the government can provide, government bodies like the Arbitration Commission can provide neutral umpires, they haven't actually recognised that. So there's no more social contract, there's no more Mr. Nice Guy deals to be done between capital labour and the state, and that the alternative is actually to get people organised in solidarity in their workplaces and to build up strength to stand up for rights, and to look at also social changes like the basic wage was based on a household with the man as the breadwinner and a woman and 2 children as the other people in the house, providing 35 or 40 hours a week, maybe 50 when overtime was on, to the system. And now households provide many, many more hours a week and much more diversity, and the minimum wage as an hourly rate can't even function as a minimum wage because it's not a minimum income, because people's hours of work are so diversified. So it's not even 888 isn't even relevant anymore. It's like we need a completely different way of organising work, care, and looking after each other. And in some ways we need ideas injected into the union movement in order to do this. It's not just a matter of saying get organised and get out there. It's rethink what demands do we place for the reorganisation of the way we live in order to be able to have everybody take a fair share of work, care and income.
I'd invite the other guests to speakers to have a crack at it.
I'll just talk from the point of view of some of the vulnerable communities and the migrant communities. They're not even part of that movement. They're not even aware of that movement, and some of them may not have the opportunity to be part of it because they're international students, or the part of the gig economy, which is really not unionized. So there could be I'm a lawyer, so I'll always talk about changes in legislation for achieving anything, but that's a long process. I don't have a solution except that we should probably, I'm not an expert to give a solution, but I really think it's important for international students, casual workers, the gig economy workers to be included as part of the movement, for it to really reflect the population that we are at the moment, the demographic that we are.
I should say it's great to see the Transport Workers Union taking up some of the gig economy issues. But moving on, perhaps if you want to talk to Vivienne about how you feel the story of people in your situation has been let slip. So how do we get that story back in there with social movements like unions?
Well, with unions, I'm more interested in reaching, like I said in my speech, the people that haven't been affected by all of this, the people that haven't had to access Centrelink or aren't in that gig economy or, low paid. My idea now is to reach the people that are comfortable, to tell them this is what's happening, and, with the stories that I've been told, to tell those stories on behalf of the people that trusted me with their stories and their vulnerability, and try and reach hearts and minds, and like I said, change people's values around that. And then that collective consciousness, I really believe in that, like that shift that we all need to make. I'm hoping it'll just tick over and everyone will wake the fuck up. And I thought COVID would be a great opportunity that everyone stopped. Everyone kind of realised what was important all of a sudden. And it wasn't 888, it was bake for a while, but get to know your neighbour and, play with the kids, with puppies, with...
What do you think about universal basic income?
Oh, absolutely. That's that UN declaration. Everyone has the right for shelter and food and freedom from fear and to thrive.
It's cheaper, by the way.
Sorry?
It's cheaper also.
Sorry?
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper. Okay.
It's a long conversation. I'm going to hand it back to Rosanna to wrap it, if you like. Rosanna? What have you like?
Look, I think that...
Allies.
I don't want to... I think Janet said a lot about neoliberalism, but one thing is clear, that we are living in a climate of deregulation, liberalisation and privatisation, and we're moving more and more towards that. It's less about people and it's more about companies and profit. There is no doubt about that. And those connections to the destruction of environment, the dehumanisation of society, the broken communities, and really we really need to organise and mobilise and really call for these significant universal changes and recognise that we have the power. We are the 99%, and those bastards have to start listening to us if we are a united voice and to be reckoned with. You know, I don't see any other way that we can make these changes. We have to hold them accountable, and the only way that we can do that is if we can organise and mobilise.
Organising is a fantastic tool. It's something that all four of these women, I think, embody. And for me, I'd like to say, can you please thank them very greatly for their contribution this afternoon and onwards. Thank you again to Rosanna, Janet, Molina and Vivienne, and I'm sure they'd welcome your chats afterwards as well, and this is not something that will go away. I know we've got, technically speaking, a 5-minute break now, but maybe a couple of minutes, says Mark.